You know, the 2000s were the peak time of edge. In pop culture and really as a general society, we seemed a lot edgier. The music, movies, and especially video games we were aiming for were a lot more mature and, well, I guess to be repetitive, they were edgy. And here we have Star Wars, stuck in the middle of all this. I mean, the prequel trilogy had started just before the turn of the millennium, and with that it existed in a far different time than its original releases. It was quite a different era from the chill vibes of the 70s and the intoxicating pearl clutching of the 80s. Now, Star Wars was one of the biggest multimedia franchises on the planet. Except one problem. The last movie in the prequel trilogy released in 2005, which meant Lucasfilm needed something big. Needed something powerful, something with that edge. And that's where we get The Force Unleashed. Is it gonna do that every time I say it? Hold on a second. Unleashed. Okay, that's kind of fun. Unleashed. Oh god. Oh my god. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't think it would get so out of hand.
You agreed to stay away. I lied.
So it's 2004 and 6 developers are sat down to think up of a new hit Star Wars game. A bunch of ideas are tossed around. A hypothetical Knights of the Old Republic 3? Nah, maybe a game where you play as Darth Maul? Maul isn't cool enough just yet. A game about a Wookiee freedom fighter superhero? Who comes up with this bantha poodoo? Eventually, they would all come to an agreement to make a game set in between the ending of the prequel trilogy and the start of the original films, but with a major twist. Instead of a Jedi, we'll be playing an all-new, all-cool, fresh character. A secret apprentice of Darth Vader named Starkiller. When you think about it, Starkiller is the Shadow the Hedgehog of Star Wars. Don't think about it too hard, I'm right. A cool new character that's sort of an inversion of things you'd expect from a Star Wars protagonist. He's not some wide-eyed young boy or a scruffy smuggler or even a stone-cold mercenary. Instead, he's like a dark side Black Ops agent, or a Sith assassin if you will, taught to attack any target on Lord Vader's whim, while also needing not to be discovered by the Empire or anyone else for that matter. A sort of secret blade left in shadow. But of course, with a premise like this and the landscape around it, they couldn't just make it like any old Star Wars story. No. Instead, we had to take the Force and unleash it. Electrocuting whole rooms of people, curling up and exploding with Force repulse, and even pulling an entire Star Destroyer out of the sky? That's cool and all, but how would that even be made? Well, eventually, the team of 6 people would grow to much larger, and would also make W. Hayden Blackman the director, creative lead, and the writer, a sort of triple threat on the team. Along with the go-ahead from the Big G himself, that's George Lucas, they got to collaborate with Industrial Light and Magic. You know, the premier special effects company in film. Basically, they were working with LucasArts to make the best, highest quality Star Wars game projects to date, using a piece of technology called Clone Cam, a motion capture tool which was actually used in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. This choice actually led developers into casting the game a bit differently. Instead of casting primarily on voice talent like most games do, they had to cast like a film, taking into account not only the voice of their talents, but also their physicality and presentation. Casting the likes of Nathalie Cox as Juno Eclipse, Coley Fredrickson as Ram Koda, and Sam Witwer as Galen Merrick, aka Starkiller, aka the Dark Apprentice. Which Sam Witwer would eventually become a well-beloved figure in the Star Wars community for his love of the series, and also his incredible work as Darth Maul. Mr. Witwer, if you're seeing this, you're one of the only beams of light in this twisted post-Book of Boba Fett world. But yeah, around the time of its release, The Force Unleashed— okay, I'm shortening to TFU for now. TFU felt like a blockbuster game, like the next major step in the series. Don't get me wrong, there are other Star Wars games that are definitely as good, if not better than this one. But it really felt like they wanted this particular game to be the big Star Wars game. We had action figures, comic books, even a Lego set. Hey, maybe you guys can also like, hype, subscribe, and comment so I can make enough money to buy that Force Unleashed Lego set, by the way. Please? Anyways, even the trailer of the game called it the next chapter of the Star Wars saga. This was basically meant to be Star Wars 3.5, and if Kingdom Hearts has taught me anything, decimals are a great way to trick the usual number scheme of a franchise. Though, I think we still need to answer one question. Is the game even good? So, we immediately start the game with it kicking down the door one of the best intros in really any game. Oh, not that one, get that out of here, that's for later. Personally, I'm a bit of a sucker of the trope that lets you play as an overpowered character or the fully upgraded version of your character as the intro in the game and then taking it away afterwards. It gives you something to work towards, it shows you the highs you can achieve, but you gotta realize you must rise from the bottom first. I'd also say everything about this prologue is perfect. You get to play around with the physics, which by the way, The Force Unleashed uses 3 separate physics engines within the game, combining Havoc, Euphoria, and Digital Molecular Matter or DMM into one new engine called Ronin. Now, I'm not a game developer in the slightest. I tried it once, felt a few blood vessels in my brain collapse, and realized it wasn't for me. But I understand enough to know that this is insane, even by today's standards. Anyway, you just feel so powerful as you slice through all these Wookiees on the platforms like Kashyyyk. They even add these little impact frames and camera shake on your lightsaber slashes to make it feel like your saber hits like a truck. I will say the level looks maybe like there was a bit too much bloom. Maybe my visual settings are weird or something, but there are moments in the level where the wood looks like it's glowing. But I guess to be fair, most games from 2006 to 2013 were either poo-poo brown and pee-pee yellow, or had enough bloom to fry the skin off a grown man. The particle effects in the Force, though, are immaculate. I know it wasn't a new thing to visualize the Force in games as a slightly transparent blue energy, but the way it looks here just looks incredible. I especially love that the Force push is this massive blue wave that just smacks into enemies. Eventually, we end this level with a boss fight, and I'll be real, most of the bosses in this game are just fine. They're not horrifically bad, well, most of them, but a lot of these boss fights kind of feel like you're just gonna smash your lightsaber or force push into them until their health hits low enough to start the quick time event. It is fun to see the bosses you fight ragdoll around when you do eventually land a good hit on them, but I can't really say any of the boss fights stood out to me like they do in many other action games. And now this is where Vader discovers the Jedi we've been sent to hunt has
A son.
And this is the backstory of our hero, which leads into this really good dissolve from the eyes of Starkiller as a child into him as an adult. The game has a lot of well-directed and framed cutscenes. This was during the time when a lot of games were trying their hardest to look more like movies than games, but I think this game was one that adapted cinematic language well into its visuals and cutscenes. In this scene, there's an interesting little moment of Starkiller showing a bit of hesitation when Vader says to kill Imperials and Rebels alike, which I think was meant to be a subtle moment to show our guy isn't completely irredeemable. But other than that, this scene is mostly just kicking the plot into gear and introducing our cast. Proxy, a droid that could disguise itself and is programmed to try and kill Starkiller. I feel like that breaks a few laws of robotics. And Juno Eclipse, the pilot for the Rogue Shadow. She comes off as someone who definitely obeys orders, but could be a bit sassy and independent as well, kind of riding the line between Imperial bootlicker and a woman who takes charge. I mean, to me, Imperial bootlicker is a red flag, but hey, you do what you like if that's what you like, I guess. Also, the Rogue Shadow just looks really cool, alright? I'll admit, the name is definitely on the nose, hell, it's on the cornea of the eye, but the design is so interesting. It's very asymmetrical and reflects the very disheveled look of Starkiller in these earlier missions. It's a nice ship design, but we all know Star Wars is the king of unique and fresh looking spaceships. After a small tutorial, which I'll be honest feels a bit necessary, I mean we did just spend the entire intro level learning the controls, but whatever, we enter our first true level and it's pretty good. It's such a great choice that we start in an Imperial shipyard, going from a planet lush and full of life to a place of industry with dull grays, black and white. It feels like we've gone from Starkiller's more warm childhood into this new, icy, dangerous life. Here we start with just the force push and grab as our main force abilities. I kinda wanted just to go buck wild with the lightning, but I gotta earn that iconic Sith power. The level design itself is pretty simple, but good. It gives you a lot of leeway to learn the main gameplay of the game. Fighting enemies, doing crazy physics things with the Force, and collecting holocrons, which, if I may, I have a little complaint here. In this game, a holocron can contain all sorts of things, such as things to level up abilities, costumes, health, and lightsaber crystals. Now, throughout each level, there's maybe about 10 to 15-ish holocrons, which is fine. But if I'll be real, it can be a bit underwhelming when you get into a hard to find place for a holocron, and it's just more points to level up. I don't know, maybe if they made it more clear what each collectible contained within it, I wouldn't be complaining. But since every collectible in here is all under the same holocron model, it kind of feels like a random chance at what you'll get. Anyways, back to the level itself. It's segmented really well, giving you a lot of moments to remember and get used to the physics of the game. You're moving through so many different set pieces and moments that all feel pretty impactful. Plus it's cool to fight off these proto-rebels and stormtroopers. There's also moments where they add in these little hints of other colors to make the level not feel too bland and gray. Though this little section right here where I had to place the TIE Fighter wings at these little sections just to get a holocron made me realize the physics can be very finicky at times, which definitely can be part of the fun, but can also be frustrating if you're actually trying to do something very precise. Eventually we make it to the first Jedi we're sent to kill. General Ramcoda, which is a solid fight, but I feel like the arena we fight in should be a bit different visually. This is meant to be an Imperial shipyard, and yet the control room we fight in has these bright blues and faded grays. I feel like it should have more red, black, and a lot more gunmetal gray coloring than what we got here, you know? Make it have this oppressive tone that a lot of Empire tech and command centers and buildings and such seem to have. I do like in the latter half of the battle the room gets all destroyed and cracked, but other than that, the boss fight is not exactly a highlight of the game. It's kind of a tone center for many of the bosses within here, I'll be honest. But enough of that. It's time we went on to Raxus Prime and... Hoo boy. Remember how I said earlier that a lot of games from 2006 to 2013 kinda had this bad poo-poo brown and pee-pee yellow color? Well, this level is yet another example of this trend. And if I'm being real, making the second level of your game the worst one is a brave choice. Look, I don't want to be mean, but I genuinely hated playing this level. It's just horrendous to look at. The enemies just appear and swarm you, and the level itself is so hard to navigate at times because everything is just terrible to look at. Look, if I wanted the world to look like it was dipped in a gas station bathroom, I would have done it by now. The only thing I liked about this level is that you unlock Force Lightning here, which is probably the most versatile attack in the game. You need some enemies off you? Zap. Clear a room? Zap. You need a stun? Zap. You know, it's also just kind of satisfying, to kind of, look at a guy and electrify him, you know what I mean? You can also now start mixing together force attacks with your lightsaber swings, which is the real meat and potatoes of the combat. It's just inherently cool to swing your lightsaber around with electricity wrapping around it like a cocoon, and just watch enemies fly off into the horizon when you do this. It's a shame that all the cool new ways to explore your abilities, though, start here and not in a better level. We end this level by fighting Kazdem Paratus, a Jedi who's gone insane and built a recreation of the Jedi Temple out of the scrap of this world. I will say, it's a bit of a missed opportunity that this level wasn't built around us walking through this Jedi temple sort of scrap heap, But whatever. I guess they wanted us to fight Jawas, Rhodians, and ugly looking scrap robots instead. So how is the fight with Paratus? I'm gonna be real, this shit is buns. For one, we don't really get a sense of Paratus' unhinged nature. Sure, we can destroy the surrounding area, but he doesn't really react much at all. I'm pretty sure he'll just yell or something, but that's really it. I feel like if they added in like a little trick to this fight, if you destroyed one of the Jedi statues and Paratus would try to go over and fix it and leaving him weak, that would be a fun way to interact with the environment and understanding Paratus' mind state. Instead, he just combo locks you to hell, jumps around a bit, and that's really all. Though when he dies, he explodes into some sort of force energy. Well, it's more like a beam shoots out of him, but I don't remember the Force doing that, and I don't think it really gets explained, so okay, I guess. I don't know why they waste such a cool death on this guy, but whatever. Next up, we're on Felucia, which, thank God, does look better than Raxus Prime, but now we encounter a new issue. These annoying Felucian enemies are everywhere. It wouldn't be so bad if they didn't combo stun you to all hell and can somehow block your lightsaber swings. Look, these enemies are genuinely mad annoying, and eventually you'll learn that you could just toss them around back and forth, but it's still just kind of annoying that you really can only fight them with one method, This is also where a member berry went off in my brain. Within this game, Starkiller actually gets a new outfit for every single level you play, and you could even customize your lightsaber and change outfits for him within the game. He's a fashion icon of the Star Wars world. On the bright side, you do have some cool Rancor fights, the environment is pretty good looking, and Shaak Ti is a better boss fight than Paratus. I mean, it's not a high bar, but it is better. And now we've done our first 3 tasks. I think Vader would be super happy with us. Obviously, we don't stay dead here, and this is where we get into the real main course of the game. Basically, after Vader kills you, only to revive you soon after, we're tasked with finding the enemies of the Empire and rounding them up to fight the Empire by Darth Vader. On the one hand, this does make for a natural driving force in the narrative, Starkiller bouncing from world to world collecting rebels to form the Rebellion. You even get to retrace your steps, sort of, and revisit a whole lot of worlds you may have harmed in your earlier missions, and now help them out. But my main pet peeve with this element of the story is that it is just a mission from Vader. Now, I know what this develops into, I'm not jumping the gun here. I know this was a plan for the Emperor to round up all his detractors and then finally have a reason to knock them off. Oh, spoilers for a game that's old enough to vote, by the way. But my main issue is that it kind of makes the rebellion feel like it doesn't have any agency in its own formation. On the one hand, it is sort of poetic that the Empire inadvertently makes the very force that overthrows them, but I also feel like it leaves the rebellion not feeling truly like a rebellion, and more like an Empire plan gone haywire. It feels less like a scrappy grassroots effort that grew over time, and more like a poor decision that grew out of hand. It doesn't ruin the story for me or anything, but I've always preferred the idea that the rebellion started as a bunch of smaller factions that eventually grouped together, much like how Andor presents it, which by the way is one of the best Star Wars shows of all time. I don't know, maybe I'm being nitpicky, let me know how you feel about it below. After this, we set up a mission where Starkiller has to escape the Imperial, an Imperial ship that's being sent directly into a star. This is a nice little level with a lot of good set pieces, great new enemies, and so on, running around in a medical garb and taking on all sorts of new Stormtrooper enemies, which will now be the main enemy faction of the game. They also introduce us to Evo Troopers, who have these cool designs and electricity all around them, as well as Purge Troopers, who seem to be like a sort of Dark Trooper prototype for the Dark Forces game. I mean, it's not one for one, but I noticed the similarities. We then go to Cloud City, which I always swore that this was always Nar Shaddaa, but I guess it's actually always been Cloud City? I don't know, maybe I'm just misremembering. Anyways, this is another great level with a lot of interaction, letting you smack up Ugnaughts and all sorts of other random people. Also, the bounty hunter fit is quite good here. We also find Coda here, alive, somehow. He's now blind and a drunkard, which I actually kind of like that character shift for him. The idea that after Starkiller, he's a bit of a broken man. I mean, one guy did just pull up and ruin everything he's been working on for like decades now. Also here you could freeze people in Carbonite, which is just a really cool detail. It's just a good level, and to be honest, the game really is starting to up its level design and creativity from here on out. It's also funny that the Shadow Guard is introduced as a boss here, but is more or less a normal enemy later. I do love that stuff, but usually it's done earlier in a game than towards the midpoint, you know? Next up is Kashyyyk, which has probably the best Starkiller fit in the whole game. Come on. That's tough as hell, man. There's this beautiful moment where Starkiller finds his old home burnt to the ground. I'll be honest, they don't do much to explore his past in this game, which I actually think is a missed opportunity, especially when moments like this show there's a real emotional core here, that, if I'm honest, needed to be explored a lot more. It makes the badass action moments hold more weight when they see that there's real genuineness there. Seeing Kashyyyk all burnt down and destroyed by the Empire is also just a good idea. All the color from the intro was gone, replaced by the dead grays and charred black and brown of the cold Imperial grasp on the world. There's so much interaction here. Things to throw, Wookiees to free, and there's some fan service that doesn't derail the plot when you meet a young Princess Leia. Though this bit at the end where you gotta stop and hold for so long to pull up these pylons is just really boring, which really is a fatal flaw with the whole game. The game usually has you stop and then just wait to lift objects or push things out of the way to continue. It could have been made a bit more simple, maybe just electrocuting the pylons and have them blow up, but instead you just gotta lift, and lift, and lift. At least they give you the purple lightsaber crystal here, so that's cool. That's the coolest lightsaber color, by the way. Well, that and the dark saber color, but still, it's cool. There's also a really good moment here after the level where Starkiller almost blows his cover and his hand goes straight to the saber on his belt. It's a great tense moment, but I like to imagine that Coda just plays it casual. In fact, I like to imagine Coda knows the whole time and just instead works with Starkiller because he knows there's good inside him. I don't know if that's the story's intent, but it makes the character more interesting when thought about it that way. Of course, I was dreading the next level because we're going back to Felucia, but this is one of the best levels in the game. Maybe not as good as when we returned to Kashyyyk, but still really good. Much like the previous level, we see this beautiful world overtaken by evil. Not just the industrial might of the Empire, but there's also a rot of the dark side, seeing the native Felucians warped into these melting zombie-esque creatures. Much like the last level, it barely feels like a reuse of assets. Sure, we are technically going back to where we were previously, but it's so different that most wouldn't really care. Nor do I, because it gets the thematic ideas across of what just the Empire does, and how terrifying the dark side can be when, untamed. The best part has to be when you enter the Sarlacc pit. The Empire has dug it out in places and installed a base within it, which really shows the level of arrogance on the Empire's behalf. Nobody would logically do this, but instead the Empire feels the need to defy nature. Why? Because they simply can. I feel like this area is one of the few moments where using the Force to get further into the environment feels like a proper puzzle. It's simple, yeah, but you are rewarded for knowing what abilities to use to keep yourself safe. Though, the boss fight here does suck. Second worst in the game after Paratus. Making you fight a Bull Rancor as the stupid Sith lady Maris Brood smacks you with attacks if you do too well, and then fighting her after is so easy. It's just a meh boss fight that feels like a last-minute addition. There's then a great scene with Vader and Starkiller having an interesting dialogue, with Starkiller showing he's slowly starting to break away from Vader's control over him, which also leads into Juno chastising him. Though, if I'll be real, this moment would have had more impact if we spent more time seeing Starkiller touch in more with the light side. I feel like if there was just another moment or two to see Starkiller break away from the dark, it would be a good touch for smoothing out the plot and making him more compelling. I do love this moment, though.
I hate being him.
I think he does too.
And a lot like the previous level, I was kind of a bit cautious for this next one. Going back to Raxus Prime, Doo-Doo World, and, well, I guess it is better. It's not great, but it's just okay. And yeah, I'm sorry to say, but pulling down the Star Destroyer sucks. It takes too long. It's boring, and there's no amount of feedback on it whatsoever. I'm not saying there needs to be some sort of controller vibration or something more intense, but I don't know, maybe stop the TIE fighters from attacking after pulling it down fast enough or far enough or something? Or maybe you can add in a little communication you can tap into of the Imperials inside the Star Destroyer panicking? I don't know, something. The moment here just feels flat and kind of monotonous. Oh, there is also a proxy boss fight here, and it just feels forced. I guess it's cool you can battle Darth Maul, technically, but I mean, what does this fight add to the story or the goals of the characters? It just feels like they needed a boss to fight right here and tossed a bunch of models they had left over at you. I don't know, I guess it does technically make sense, but I just feel like it's a bit forced. But at least we get to the big finale. Now having this scene play for us.
You agreed to stay away!
I lied, as I have from the very beginning.
I mean, it is an obvious twist, but it does not take away from the impact at all. The way Starkiller sells his anguish, Proxy sacrificing himself, and the big moment of seeing the rebellion form, it all leads into, honestly, one of the best endings of any Star Wars game, in my opinion. Battling through the Death Star that's still under construction. I will say this level does do a bit of enemy spam at times, but I do think this is a level that really does test your skills. My only complaint is the Death Star laser puzzles. Dodging the lasers is actually great and I love that, but then having to go down and stop these discs as they run is just kinda meh. Also, you do get the Black Saber Crystal here, which is great. I just wish it wasn't right before the final boss. I guess you can use your cool lightsaber for a little bit of the game, which is just the final boss fight, but I don't know, could we have at least had this for a bit longer? The Vader fight is kinda anticlimactic. I wish it felt more impactful, you know? It just feels like it's missing something, but I can't fully remember. The Palpatine fight isn't bad, but I wish he used his lightsabers and did some stuff from Revenge of the Sith or something, just to make it feel like you're really fighting him. But the best bit here is actually the fact you get to choose between a good and bad ending. You can choose really who you want to be. A selfish a-hole dark side path that ends up with everyone you care for dead, or a heroic light side path with you making the ultimate heroic sacrifice. They didn't need to do this, but I'm glad they did add it in because it makes it far more memorable. Obviously, the dark side path isn't canon because, well, the movies still need to happen. But there is one reason to do the dark side path. Non-canonical DLC, which are actually super fun. Well, there is also DLC of the Scrap Jedi Temple level, and
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
look, I'm just gonna be real, I'm completely fine that it was cut. It's clearly unfinished, and I don't really have much to say on it beyond, yeah, it's just kind of annoying to play. However, the other DLCs, which branch off of the dark side ending, might be the best stuff from this whole game. So, the first DLC is a flip on the intro of A New Hope, aka Star Wars 1977, the first movie ever released chronologically. Okay, as in our world chronology, you get what I mean. And now we have Darth Starkiller, at least that's what I like to call him to kind of separate him from the original. And he's just being a menace to Tatooine. Which, can I just say, I appreciate the restraint on the developers to not make Tatooine a level in the main game. Nowadays, it seems like everything in Star Wars has this need to go back to Tatooine at some point. With all due respect, Tatooine is not supposed to be a special place. Yes, Luke and Anakin grew up there, but other than that, it's not meant to be a place that people go to. It's meant to be a bummy, backwater, nowhere planet. So when you have Starkiller just showing up because it's his mission, actually makes sense instead of trying to come up with some contrived reason for him to pull up. Anyways, we destroy a Jawa caravan, completely ravage Jabba's palace, and whoop Boba Fett's ass. Hell yeah, take that you overrated character. This is for the Book of Boba Fett. And yes, Boba Fett is the most overrated Star Wars character ever. Jango Fett's better, no questions, fight me in the comments. We eventually make our way to Mos Eisley and fight Obi-Wan, which at first is a pretty solid boss fight. I mean, it's a better boss fight than most in the game, with a decently sized arena to boot, but then we fight as Force Ghost, and I don't think this was ever how it worked, but I do not care. This DLC might be one of the best things in all of Star Wars gaming, just showing us how crazy the Force could be when cranked up to 11. Plus, the absurdity of killing someone and then killing their ghost is one of the funniest things in any game I've ever seen. Genuinely 10 out of 10 boss fight. But there is a follow-up with the Hoth DLC, which is, yes, a flip on the intro to the best Star Wars movie, The Empire Strikes Back. Look, I know it's a normie opinion, but sometimes the normies know what they're talking about, okay? I mean, what's your favorite? Solo? We actually start in the caves of Hoth, and I will admit, this part's just okay. The Wampas just swarm you, but you can actually deal with them pretty well. There's also a lot of platforming, and it's not that great in this game. This game's not exactly built to be like, oh, I don't know, Mario Galaxy, though it does get much better once you break into Echo Base. You just break in there and you just start ripping through rebels and Wampas and turning them into charred confetti, all ending with a boss fight where you make Luke Skywalker himself crash out and embrace the dark side. Maybe that wouldn't have happened if we, oh, I don't know, didn't toss Obi-Wan's ghost in the exhaust of the Millennium Falcon, but hey, that moment was awesome, so I really have no regrets. And yeah, that's The Force Unleashed, a game that's sort of rough around the edges, but it still works for the most part. Sure, the physics can be buggy and a little out of whack at times, and the story may need a bit more exploration, but I think it all comes together to make a pretty neat package that's aged pretty well for the most part. There's just one problem. While this game is great, this is not the game I remember playing. The level structure, the bosses, the customization, everything felt similar but not quite there, like a distorted version of itself. And that's when I realized I played this on PS2. Okay, so The Force Unleashed is one of the highest selling Star Wars games of all time. Now, this is because of the hype train behind it, no doubt, but it's also because it was released on everything. It was released on PC, PS3, Xbox 360, the Wii, PS2, DS, even the PSP. Now, when I was growing up, I only had a PS2 and eventually a Wii. I had a DS for like 2 weeks and it was stolen. True story, by the way, that actually happened. But my first two consoles were a PS2 and a Wii, obviously. Thus, the version that I played on was on the PlayStation. When I tell you I felt a little bit insane as a kid trying to talk to my very few friends about The Force Unleashed, I mean it. We would talk about it and always felt like we were talking about different games. And that's because the version developed for the Wii, PS2, and PSP is a very different version from the HD consoles. Also, little thing here, I'm not covering The Force Unleashed for the DS. Sorry, but I already have a lot to talk about, so my bad. Anyways, this version is pretty similar across all three of its platform releases, with only the Wii version being slightly different because of its motion controls, and the PSP having an extra mode. This iteration of the game was made by Chrome Studios, who actually has a pretty solid track record. They're a small studio in Australia and have done a lot of work in the licensed game world and also have made a few of their own IPs. Some people might know them for the first two Legend of Spyro games, which are not really my cup of coffee, but I've heard people really like these games. But what I know them most for, other than The Force Unleashed on the PS2, is Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. Genuinely a pretty nice series of platformers for the 6th generation of consoles, and I also think they taught me a little bit about Australian culture when I was a kid. Genuinely some underrated fun if you ever get your hands on them. So yeah, this is the version of the game I hold closest to my heart, but I also do want to give it the time of day because it is genuinely a different game in many ways to its other counterpart. Let's just get right into it. Immediately we see a big difference between the intro level of the HD and PS2 version, now being set at night, and if I'll be real, I actually like it a lot more. Don't get it twisted, the HD version's intro is still iconic, but the setting at night and seeing the battle take place and the fire along the trees is actually a crazy good atmosphere. I think it sells the tragedy of Starkiller's backstory better, immediately setting the story in darkness. There's also a slight detail change I noticed here, and it's that the troopers look closer to the clone armor style than the traditional stormtroopers, which I also like more. I mean, there's only like 19 years in between episode 3 and 4, so on paper it actually makes sense that the 501st Legion may have had the older armor style here closer to the ones we see later. I will say though, the boss fight isn't much better than the HD version, but I think it just had better vibes. Now we see the same-ish cutscenes as the other version, but due to weaker hardware, they're definitely not as polished when it comes to their textures and animation. I also do think all the cutscenes in this version are all in-engine, so at least we're not seeing an extreme amount of visual change up between the gameplay and cutscenes. When comparing the first level to the HD game, I'll be real, I do think the HD level is better. This version is mostly a collection of smaller rooms and hallways with not too much interaction, though I do love that you could just throw people into space. That's a good touch that I don't even think is in the other iteration. Also, you do start here with pretty much all your basic abilities and don't really need to unlock them throughout the game. You start with your force push, grab, lightning, repulse, all the basic abilities you need, other than of course combos you unlock later. But here is also where we see actual improvements over the HD version. For one, now all the collectibles are separate items. Yes, saber crystals, health upgrades, force upgrades are all separate items when they appear. Saber crystals are large crystals that appear, health holocrons are green and force holocrons are blue, and the basic white holocrons are now just cool concept art and other bonuses. We even have an extra collectible with lightsaber hilts, which are the smallest to find, but there are only about 10 of them in the game, so I guess that's kinda fair. Luckily, you'll collect maybe about half of them as you just play along normally. Also, there is sadly no dark saber crystal in this version, which does kinda suck, but at least it feels a lot more satisfying to collect things now. Now you don't really have to pray that a holocron will have something cool in it other than force points for upgrading. You know exactly what you're getting. And in my opinion, you should make it more clear what the player is collecting, especially if you're going to make it such a core aspect of the game. Back to the level though, if there's one place where I'd say it actually is an improvement over the other one, it's the Ramkoda boss fight. In the HD version, it's a room that's mostly gray with cyan holograms like I talked about earlier. But here it's now mostly reds, dark gray, gunmetal, fuzzy red lighting dotting the walls and floors. This is exactly what I thought it should look like. An Imperial Command Center should feel dark and ominous instead of whatever color choices they made in the HD version. Anyways, you know how the story goes by now. Bada bing, bada boom, we blind Coda, we win, hooray! But wait, what's this? The menu in between levels is inside the Rogue Shadow? Okay, so here's the thing about this version that I actually think makes it stand out from the other. And honestly, I kinda see why so many people prefer this one. While this game may not be graphically powerful or have the uber powerful physics engines of the other version, what this version does have is an attention to detail, extra elements that add to it, and really just have a lot of personality. To be honest, I wonder why the HD version doesn't have an interactive menu like this. But here it makes us feel like we are a Sith apprentice hunting down Jedi and doing missions. Sure, a lot of these things you could do here you can also just do in the basic pause menu, but that doesn't matter because it adds personality and texture. Like how changing your costume is actually just using proxy to see how your costumes would look, or how the cheats menu is you talking to Juno and putting in secret Imperial codes, or how later on, the menu for changing your lightsaber is you sitting with Ramkoda. It's these little things and touches that leave an impact on you, and shows that the developers truly cared about what they're making. Not saying LucasArts and the team working on the HD version didn't care, but I think Chrome had a blast working on this game, or at least, that's what it looks like. Also, making it so changing your costume or using cheats doesn't stop your progress is a good touch. Yeah, I don't know why the HD version had this weird thing about using cheats or changing your costume either had to make you reload back to the previous save state or just stopped your progress altogether. It's just so lame. Just let me wear the costume I want. It's literally in the game. Why would you not want me to do this? So, yeah. Letting me wear the Corellian flight suit all game is another way this version is better. Anyways, after this week, don't go to Raxus Prime. No. Instead, we're going to the ruins of the Jedi Temple. Yes, the level that was cut from the other iteration is here. I mean, it was added as DLC, but still, you get what I mean. Though it's not really like that game's awful Jedi Temple at all. In fact, crazy to say, it's good. We actually come back here 3 separate times throughout the plot. Now, the map doesn't really change all that much at all, but instead we're exploring new areas of the temple previously locked away. It makes the story feel like we're actually progressing, and it feels like we're getting closer and closer to the light throughout the story. There's also a great detail that each time you come back, new enemies appear, so it feels like the security increases each time you arrive. Anyways, I think just to save time, I'll cover the first 2 times you show up to the temple since they are pretty similar and close together in the story, but the third one has a lot more plot relevance and that comes later, so we'll just cover it then. Basically, you're beating troopers, throwing statues, but both of these times you're sent to kill ancient Sith ghosts to further your training. Now, why do Sith ghosts appear in the Jedi Temple? It could be because the Jedi Temple was built on top of an ancient Sith shrine. Well, okay, it's complicated. That's probably not canon anymore, but still, that could be an explanation. Okay, I just looked it up on Wikipedia, and apparently there are actually simulations made by the Jedi for their trials, as in used to test your Force abilities to see if you're able to be a Jedi. Not gonna lie, I didn't actually know that was part of the trials, but now I do. You see, you can always learn some new lore, even if you already know a lot. Anyways, on your first arrival, you fight the spirit of Darth Decilis, who actually has a really cool design. He holds up a shield and he has these ancient looking robes that are tied in with armor. He's just really sick looking and honestly one of the better boss fights in the game. Like an actual standout fight. Though beating him by splatting a large statue on him is kinda just a meh finish, but whatever. The second time you go back, which is literally the level immediately after your previous visit, the story structure is literally you go to the temple, then you go to Raxus Prime, spoilers, sorry about that, and then you go back to the temple again. It's a pretty short level like the last one, but now we have this new Sith voice that's mocking and provoking Starkiller as he goes deeper. We get to see the Jedi Library and even the Archive, which I always thought had a great aesthetic. This glowing blue tech contrasting the marble-like halls of the Jedi Temple is such a unique vibe. It kinda reminds me of what Forerunner stuff used to look like in Halo before Microsoft and 343 forgot what that looked like. The boss fight here though is Darth Phobos. That's probably the least creative Sith name ever. She even says, "Your fear is intoxicating." Yeah, I get it, you're the fierce Sith ghost. Anyways, she has a decent idea for a fight, shapeshifting into Juno, which Starkiller is trying to hide his growing affection for. I do like this idea that he is trying to hide his emotions and not grow attached. Though if I'm being real, Juno and Starkiller have like zero chemistry, at all. I get the idea she's the first person who's not died around him outside of Vader and Proxy, but what does she see in him? I've heard the book does a lot better to flesh this out, though I've not read it at all, so I can't really speak on that. The boss fight itself is okay, nothing too special outside of its gimmick. Anyways, we're gonna do a bit of a rewind and talk about the planet wedged in between these two Jedi Temple levels, Raxus Prime. Now, as you already know through watching this video, I despise Raxus Prime in the HD version. So how's it on the PS2? Oh my god, it's so much better, you have no idea. For starters, the planet still has a lot of brown and yellow color scheming, but now they've added in enemies that stand out from the environment, as well as now there's a lot of hints of red and blue across the area. The droids you fight look 1,000 times better here, now looking like these strange beings with glowing red eyes and mismatched limbs. They have these large arms that kind of look like riot shields. There's also these strange animal-like bigger droids that actually scared me a bit as a kid. They make these loud, distorted roars and have these long, panther-like bodies. We also get a lot more exploration into the Rodian group of this world. They're basically a bunch of scrappers who function like a gang. Now, I don't really know what kind of gang would want to fight over turf on Raxus Prime. Coruscant I completely get, but this junk heap of a world? I mean, there's not really much benefit to it, but whatever, I guess. There's a great moment where the junk droids are in a full-on battle with the scrappers, and we just watch it all go down. There's so many little moments of world building here that make this immediately better than the other version of the level. This is also a great world just to show how intimidating Starkiller is, interrogating the scrappers and practically slaughtering them just for getting in his way. This is probably the most Sithy Starkiller acts in the whole game, and I'm here for it. He should be evil as hell at the start. I mean, killing Jedi is evil, but now he's attacking all sorts of other groups involved, and it just feels more malicious. Now, the overall design of Raxus is pretty simple. In fact, all the levels in the PS2 version are far more simple than the HD one, but sometimes less can be more. Now, as we'll see, I think some levels are better in the HD version for their level of interaction, but other times, I think the simpler versions of the PS2 one can be far better. Such as here, instead of making a butt-ugly level with obnoxious enemies and quite frankly half-baked physics puzzles, we now have a level that's straightforward and focuses more on fleshing out the world and the mind of the player via the characters and the visuals. Hell, I even think the boss fight here is much better. Actually, we get two in this version. A pretty simple fight where we kill the leader of the Scrappers, Drexel, by throwing an abandoned LAAT gunship right in his face, and then after that we fight Praxis. The area we fight Praxis in is far more eerie than the HD version. While I liked the mock-up council chamber, the scrap everywhere with the blue atmosphere hanging on everything just feels so much more fitting for this character's madness. Now, the boss fight itself is just okay, which is better than the load of turd ass that we were fighting in the other version, but the atmosphere is so much better that I think it carried the fight for me. We all know what's next at this point, which is Felucia and the battle with Shaak Ti. Now, I'll admit, visually, Felucia is much better in the other version. The colors are much more vibrant and different recognizable areas are much better presented. Whereas the PS2 version does have its own charm, there is what looks like to be these spores floating in the air, giving it this hazy and dangerous feeling, but I do think that it's limited because of its more linear nature. Also, the Felucian enemies here are far less annoying. They block your saber far less and just feel like a less frustrating obstacle overall. Of course, you're still fighting Rancors, and the Shaak Ti fight isn't all too different. Honestly, the level of Felucia isn't all too bad in both versions, outside of the enemies being irritating in the HD one. There is a great moment before the level where we actually get to see a little moment of Juno talking to Starkiller about the Battle of Kalos, which is a good moment to flesh out her character a bit more. I mean, she isn't as well developed as other woman characters in Star Wars games, but at least here there's something about her outside of being a pilot and Starkiller's love interest. After this, we have the whole It is a bit of a shame that escaping the Imperial in this version is just a cutscene. That was one of my favorite levels in the last one, but oh well. There is actually a big change up here. Now we find Coda on Nar Shaddaa instead of Cloud City, which actually does make a bit more sense. I mean, the Imperial shipyard we fought him on was literally in Nar Shaddaa's atmosphere. I just wish this level was, well, better. It's quite literally just walking 10 minutes to where Coda is, and then walking 10 minutes back. It also doesn't help that in the HD version, what we got was Cloud City, which is one of the best levels in that version. Hell, even the Shadow Guard boss fight here is worse. Now we're on a much smaller platform and it's just kinda lame. I'd rip into it more, but that's just it. It's a nothing level, it's bland and boring and doesn't really add anything outside of getting Coda. However, we're saved with our final trip to the Jedi Temple, which may be one of the best levels in this version of the game. We go super deep into it, going underground and making our way up to the tower of the council room, which is where we see force manifestations of Vader and Starkiller's father from the start of the game. This is genuinely the best moment of development for Starkiller's character, and that it actually baffles me it isn't in the HD version. There's this tragic character moment where the manifestation of his father tells him he can turn away from it all, but all Starkiller can reply with is, "The dark side is all I have." This is what I actually find interesting about Starkiller's character, and why redeeming himself makes for a great character arc. The dark side is the only consistency in his life. He actually shares a lot in common with Darth Maul, who Sam Witwer also famously voices, yet both characters go down completely different routes. This moment is so good for his development, and it makes me love the character and the concept behind him. I don't know why this moment was left out of the HD version outside of possible crunch time and development hurdles, but man, this is like if they cut the scene of Luke fighting Vader in the Cave of Dagobah out of the movie. Genuinely, without that scene, that movie wouldn't be as good as it was because it's a major linchpin in Luke Skywalker's character, and the same goes for this moment here for Starkiller. Moving on, we end up at Kashyyyk, which I do think is a heavy downgrade from the HD version. The other one just had a lot more fun moments and set pieces, but the PS2 one doesn't really have the scene where Starkiller sees the burnt remnant of his childhood home. Do you guys realize how much of a gut punch that'd be right after fighting the ghost of his father? Dude, I'm actually a little upset they cut that moment out. It's one of the best writing moments in the whole story. This level is just fine. We get to see the remnants of a battle between the Wookiees and the Empire, but the HD version did it better by having us see the damage they've done through industrialization. Next up, we go back to Felucia. There's actually a really cool moment at the start where we actually find the last few troops of Bail Organa's militia he brought with him to protect himself, but they just kind of stay in one spot and don't follow, so it's not really as cool as you think it would be, but it's a nice detail. Now, this level isn't bad at all, but I'd also say the HD version did it a lot better. I mean, you literally go into the Sarlacc pit in the HD version. That's all I really need to say. Of course, we all know by now this is where we return to Raxus Prime, and much like the last one, it's a lot better here. We get to explore deeper into the Imperial operation, and there's even these little rooms with lava flowing through them. The only complaint I have is that they spam the staff troopers a lot. I don't know exactly what they're called, but they're everywhere in this level. I don't even hate these enemies that much, but could you have me fight someone else here? They also have another Shadow Guard boss here, which is just fine. They got rid of the proxy boss fight here, which, in all honesty,
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
I actually didn't expect to have to use that clip twice, but here we are, Thank God they made pulling down the Star Destroyer just a cutscene. I'm sorry, but I'm not defending that terrible section. It sucked, and it should have really just been a cutscene or maybe a short QTE. Next up is another special level to this iteration of The Force Unleashed, Cloud City. Yes, for some reason Cloud City appears now and not when you have to go get Coda. However, I don't mind that much at all because this may be my favorite level from either version of the game. Maybe I'm nostalgia blind because I loved this level a lot as a kid, and I love that they tied in so many lore elements from the EU. Look, I've been a big Star Wars fan since I was a kid, okay? Do you know who Yaro Poof is? I don't think so. Basically, we're now here to save Senator Garm Bel Iblis, who is super important to the Rebellion and the New Republic in the expanded universe. But we're also fighting a new crew of bounty hunters, a ton of Mandalorians, Twi'leks, Gran, Tals, and there's even a Gungan boss fight named Cleef, and he actually looks intimidating. Look at him, he's missing an eye, he's holding a machete, and flanked by 2 killer droids. He's actually a scary looking character. And then later on you fight the boss, Choppa, and he has a Mandalorian Basilisk war drone. Maybe to some people watching this means nothing. Who am I kidding? To most people, this means nothing. But this was so cool to me as a kid because this was something major in the lore of the Old Republic era of Star Wars. So seeing it here, despite the about 4,000 year time gap in between this game and Knights of the Old Republic, it was so cool. It's a proper Easter egg that welcomes people who know to enjoy it. And for those who don't know, it's just a cool droid the boss rides on. And after this, we all know what comes next. Which leads us back to the Death Star, and we actually have a much different level this time. Instead of stopping you a few times to stop the spinning discs, it's actually a lot simpler. Just make sure the laser isn't firing and move on. The level is mostly just these larger rooms you have to fight enemies in, and you could even toss them into the laser if you want, which is pretty fun. Though there's a few more touches than that, like how you actually start the level on the scaffolding outside of the Death Star. Well, I think you call it scaffolding. And there you kind of start on the constructed area and you have to break your way in. I'll also be real, the Vader and Palpatine boss fights are way better in this version. The moves feel way more impactful and the battle arenas just feel better and more accurate to the movie somehow. The QTEs to beat them are also way more impactful. Look how Starkiller grabs Vader and just flies through the door with him in his hands. That is badass and I don't care what you say. The Palpatine fight is also better here because he actually uses his lightsaber and really flips and dips around. It's a lot more fun and accurate to how he fights in Revenge of the Sith. The endings though are pretty much the same, just now without the DLC to back up the evil ending. And yeah, that's Force Unleashed on the PS2. These two games exist in an odd symbiosis. It really feels like each one of these games has something that completes the other. The HD version has some great level design in the middle and goofy physics engine stuff, while the PS2 version has levels that add to the experience and also has levels that maybe don't rely too much on annoying gimmicks, as well as having the Jedi Temple that just adds to the story overall. When you think about it, these games, hear me out, kind of feel like the inspirations George Lucas was pulling from. George Lucas was pulling a lot of influence from mythology, things like Arthurian legend, elements of Greek tragedy, and all sorts of other things for making Star Wars. Thus, all these stories within Star Wars aren't meant to feel like these old stories passed down by generations like Beowulf, the Norse Eddas, the Odyssey. You get the idea. So in some strange way, these two games being different yet so similar get across the idea of Star Wars being mythological so well. I don't know, maybe I'm just stretching here, but the idea of these two stories told on different platforms being so different feels like being told a story by different people. And what's funny is that the events in the story aren't even 100% canon to the EU either. I mean, Starkiller would have been one of the most broken characters in all of Star Wars if he was written exactly like how he was in the games and the later EU books. But what can't be ignored, love it or hate it, is that The Force Unleashed was a major part of Star Wars, and I'd say it still is. People still love these characters and want them to come back. Will we see them come back? I don't know, but I doubt it'll be the same way we saw them before. It was the most hyped Star Wars game for its time, but I honestly believe it still holds true to its hype. Is it perfect? No. It has many odd tendencies and flaws within both versions, but I can't name anything truly like it from the Star Wars canon. You could say whatever you want, but nothing can truly take the place of Star Wars The Force Unleashed, because this game is special, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And yeah, that's all I really gotta say about that. It took me a while to make this one because I was playing through two pretty big games, but I really wanted to give it the time of day and really dig into what makes each version special as well as what I like about both. So yeah, did you like the video? Did you not? Did you think I'm dumb? Did you think I'm a genius? Let me know in the comments below. And with all that being said, I'll see you next time.